Today's daf is Masechta Bava Kamma daf Samach Beis 62, and we'll begin from just the Gemara right after the Mishnah on Samach Aleph Amud Beis, approximately about 20 lines from the bottom. Okay, so we just discussed in the Mishnah a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, whether if by Eish, the mazik of Eish, are you liable for Tamun if something's hidden amongst the stalks of wheat? Let's say you had a purse there, and it got burnt in the fire. Rabbi Yehuda says you pay what's inside. You have to pay for niskei tamun, things that are hidden. And Chachamim says you don't pay. You only pay for the visible items that were burnt, but not something hidden amongst the, let's say, amongst the wheat stalks. So the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Kahana explained, the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim is that you started the fire in your own property, you were making a barbecue, and somehow the fire spread into your friend's property. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev on niskei tamim be'esh, Rabbanan patre. Rabbanan hold that you're pater on niskei tamim be'esh. Aval b'madlik b'soich shel chaveru, if you directly went into your friend's property and started making a barbecue there, and then the fire spread. So Divrei HaKol, everybody would agree. You pay for everything that's normally to be hidden within stalks. Let's say the friend had something like an item that, let's say, something that helps plow the field, or tools that are normally to be found in a field. Even though they're not visible, even Rabbana would agree that you would have to pay because you had no permission to walk into your friend's field and start making a barbecue there. Amalei Rava said, if what you're saying is true, Ihachi Aditani Seifa, if the end of the Mishnah says, the end of the Mishnah says that Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the Chachama would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that if you light somebody's house and burn somebody's house down, you pay whatever normal items that are kept in a house, furniture, etc. That because the people normally put stuff in their own house. So if you're trying to find a case where the Chachamim would agree to Rabbi Yehuda, so then let the Mishnah differentiate in the case that it defined the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim. And when do we say that there is an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim? You lit the fire within your own property and it spread into your friend's property. But if you directly went into your friend's property without permission and started the fire there, then you would have to pay everything that's inside of it. So how could you just define that everybody would agree that if you went into somebody else's property, you're automatically going to have to pay every type of tamun? Yeah, so the Gemara says like this: Ella Amar Rava says bitarti pligi. There's a double machlokes over here. So listen closely. The pligi, the argument, Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim disagree. But if you started the fire in your own house and it spread, the Rabbi Yehuda mechayvas is kitam. That's pretty simple. That's pretty straightforward. That if you start the fire in your own property and it spread, there you'll have a machlokes. But upligi name, there's another machlokes, the madlik b'shel chaverei, that if you lit the fire directly in your friend's field. Oh, so the Rabbi Yehuda sub, and we briefly mentioned this before, but this was Rava's interpretation. He stresses it that it's a very definitive machlokes. So we said that everybody would agree that if you start the fire in your friend's house, by your friend's property, you'd have to pay for tamim. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda sub mishalim kol masha b'soichav fil arniki. You would have to pay every type of tamim, even if the guy hid there a sack of money, which is not normally kept in a field, hidden amongst the wheat stalks. Rabbanan will hold no. Things that normally are kept, let's say, normally tools that are kept with like stalks or things that help plow the field, things that help thresh the field. But if it was kalim that you don't keep in that field, like mishal, you wouldn't pay. So the only time you will pay, no matter what is in the house, what's in the property, is only if you burn somebody else's house down. So in a house, people keep everything in their house. So therefore, only there, the Chachama would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that you'll pay kol masha b'soichai. But if it was just somebody else's field you're lighting up, Rabbanim will still hold you're limited by only being liable for normal things that are kept on a field. Tana Rabbanim, we learned in a brisa. Hamalik zugadish v'hoyi by kalim bedolko. A person lit up a stack of wheat, and there was kalim inside, and they got burnt. So Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kol mashal, kol mashal soichai." You pay whatever it's inside. Chachamim say you don't pay kalim that's inside if it was not normally kept inside. No, even if it was normally kept inside, but if you started the fire in your own property, you wouldn't have to pay, even if there's something hidden amongst them. And you observe, you say that we see as if the place, the space that the kalim took up, you would be held liable. You'll be held liable for the space that the kalim took up. Just yeah. Okay, whatever is, you'll be liable as if the space where the kalim took up was full of tfuah. So you'll have to pay a little bit more. You don't look at it as empty space. And then we go to Samach Beis Amar. When did we say if you start a fire in your own property and it spread into somebody else's property? If you walked into somebody else's property and just started a barbecue there, and the fire spread, you'll pay everything that's inside of it. Again, only type of items that are normally kept on a field. Now, the Brisa continues. Rabbi Yehuda would agree to the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda would agree to the Chachamim. If a person lent. Now, Rabbi Yehuda holds Yechayev on every type of tomon, every type of hidden item. But what happens? A person lent his friend a place for his friend to lahagdish godish, to stack his, wheat there. The higdish. When he stacked his wheat there in your properties, you let somebody stack his wheat there. The hitman, but he hid stuff inside the wheat. She'ein mashal, Rabbi Yehuda would say, and then a fire started on your property, you don't have to pay for what's hidden inside the wheat. She'ein mashal dmei godish babab. You only pay the value of the godish. Why? Very simple. Because you took upon yourself the responsibility to watch his stack of wheat, but he didn't tell you that he hid stuff inside the wheat, inside the stack. So therefore, you're not responsible if a fire broke out on your property and burnt his wheat. Lahagdish chitin, you gave him permission to stack wheat. Higdish and he stacked barley, and then the barley got burned. So of course, you're not going to pay wheat to pay him back, but you'll pay barley because that's what he actually stacked there. So you only gave him the permission to stack barley there, and then he went and stacked their wheat. Again, you only gave him permission to stack barley there, and he went ahead and stacked wheat there. We're not going to give him, you're only going to have to pay barley. Chitin, let's say you gave him permission to stack wheat there. And then you look at the v'chipim b'sarim, but he covered the look of that stack of wheat with barley. So when you thought, now here it's a little different. There's wheat underneath, but you, the owner of the property, is thinking, he didn't listen to me. He put barley there. So therefore, you're thinking, I'm going to only give it the protection worthy of barley, not for the protection that's worthy of wheat, which is more expensive. So Aaron, you gave him permission to pack their barley, and he went and covered it with wheat. So you never took responsibility, even if you think it's wheat underneath. You say you're angry at the guy. What is he putting wheat in my field? In all 4 cases, you don't pay bilbad. You only pay the value of a loss of barley, nothing more. Alma Rava said, a man gave a gold coin to a woman. Okay, and in her fit of rage, and I'm sorry, and he told the Azaraboy, and he told her basically that coin is a silver coin. Hizakatu, she took in a fit of rage and damaged it. Let's say she threw it into the river. And she never knew it was gold coin, but because she was mazik a gold coin, Mishalemes dinazov, she has to pay the full value of a gold coin. Because he told her, what's going on with you that you damaged my coin? Why did you take it and throw it into the river? So Even if you did not know it was a gold coin, still people don't do these things. Pashabai, but if she was negligent in watching the gold coin, let's say she just, put it out on a park bench and was negligent, then it got stolen, she would have to pay of silver. Why? The Amalah, because she could tell him that Tiras Nikasa could be a lie, Tiras Didahava Loy could be a lie. I thought it was a silver coin, and therefore I accepted upon myself to watch it as a silver coin. I never accepted upon myself that it was a gold coin, because you actually told me that it was a silver coin. So this was Rava who came up with this idea. Amalei Rav Mordechai Rabashi. Rav Mordechai said to Rashi, "Atem Rava masnisulu law. You needed Rava to teach you this. Anomi masnitim shitula. I learned it from the brisa that we just discussed. Chiten, if a man gave a right to stack wheat, the chipim b'sayrim, and he covered it with barley, so he's thinking that it's a barley pile. So he gave him the right to carry barley there, and he covered it with wheat. Either way, you don't pay the Mei and therefore you only pay the value of Sa'irim, even though he covered it with wheat, so he could think that the pile was a wheat pile. Alma, because we tell the Shoim has a right to say Amalei the Tiras the Sa'are Kabila. I took upon myself to watch only barley, not wheat. I don't care what it is. She can say, I didn't accept upon myself to watch it as a gold coin. I took the inferior type of watching and thinking that it was only a silver coin. The Gemara continues. Amar Rav said, Shamitz Milsa Rav Yehuda Leidan Mahi. I heard something Rav Yehuda said, and I don't know what he said. In other words, Rav Yehuda, remember, said that Yechayev Aniske Tomun Be'esh, right? And things that are hidden in the standing stalks, Rav Yehuda calls the person that started the fire liable. But Rav said something's there's a caveat over here. I just don't know what it is in the words of Rabbi Yehuda. You don't know Abba is another name for Rav, which is his real name. You don't know what you heard? I'm going to tell you. Rabbi Yehuda, who holds a person liable on Niskei Toma Be'esh. Now, you don't know what was hidden inside. Let's say it actually burned something. Would you trust the victim to say, oh, I had an expensive piece of artwork hidden there? So also takanas nigzel be'ishay. They made the takana of the victim in that fire. In other words, all he has to do is swear that I had a piece of artwork in that fire. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, since the person that started the fire is liable, so therefore we would believe him with the victim with a shvua to collect on that piece of artwork. Boya Meima, I may ask the question: what happens? A guy who was a moiser. Moiser is somebody who informs the government and causes a loss to a person as the government confiscating assets belonging to somebody else. And now he wants to do tshuva. So, but the victim says, oh, what was taken away from me was such and such. Maybe the Meiser doesn't know exactly, or even if he does know, will we trust the victim to make a shvuah? Would we make the takana of the victim that we trust the victim when he swears what was taken from him, the masar, by a turncoat or not, somebody who informed the government and caused somebody else a loss? There are people who hold that a moiser you can't hold liable in a bezdin. Why? Because he only caused the loss. And dina de garmi is and not held liable only if you actually do the damage. We don't take up the cases that have to do with Mesiris, turncoats, because at best he only caused the loss. It was the government that confiscated the assets, not the tattletale. My question is that we do take up cases of cause in our courts. So therefore, a Meiser case we take up in our cause. Also, would we trust the victim to swear and collect? We wouldn't trust the victim unless they both agree what the government took. But if we wouldn't trust the victim to say, oh, the government took this and this, Teku, the Gemara remains as a question. Says the Gemara, who there was this person, Shadya Benar. He kicked the safe that normally you put money in that safe, Shad Yebenar, he kicked it into the river. Asumari v'amar. So the owner of the safe said, "Hachi v'hachi abiligava." I had, let's say, something very unique in that safe. Yasser Ravashi v'kuma ayin beiki haigav nemai. Ravashi was questioning by this mazik who purposely kicked somebody's safe into the river. Do we trust the victim to say what was in that safe? Amalei Ravina Ravachal Beri Derava. Ravina said to Ravachal, the son of Rava, Amalei Rachal Beri Derava. Ravashi Lav Haini Misnisen. Isn't this the what our Mishnah says? The Tanam we learned in Mishnah. That if you turn somebody's house on fire, you have to pay whatever is inside of it, and therefore we trust everything to say the victim to say, oh, I had such and such very high expensive furniture in my house, and we would believe him. So same thing, a person could say, I had special things in my safe. So of course we will trust the person, the victim. Amalei, so Rav Ashi, Rav Acha Bedrei Yivana explained to Ravina that's not true. Either Kotains is Hachanami. If the guy was claiming that he had money in that money safe, I would believe him. We were talking about it here, the Kotain Maganisa. He put a diamond or pearl into that safe. What do we say? Would we say that normal people do put pearls in their safe or not? And therefore, maybe the guy who's kicking the safe should have considered that perhaps there's a pearl in that safe, and I should, hold off from kicking. Maybe, maybe he comes from a rich family, and he probably said, "Oh, I'll damage the guy's safe and I'll pay him back." Okay, but maybe he didn't enter his mind that there was actually something much more valuable in that safe, and that he's going to be held liable to that. Maybe he wouldn't have done it. So, do we trust and the victim? And to say that there was a diamond in the safe. Teku, and since it's not normal to put in this money safe, so the Gemara says Teku. Amalei Rav Yemel Ravashi. The guy got his house burned down. So, but he's saying, Toin Casa de Caspo Babir. He's saying I had a silver goblet in that house. Do we trust him? Normal people, the average person doesn't have a silver goblet in their house in that time when the Gemara is written. Amalei, so Rav Ashi answered, Rav Yemer Chazina, let us observe. If he's a rich person, like Casa de Caspa, that could possibly hold a silver goblet in his house, so then we trust him. If he's an Inish Mehemnehu, that the Mafkede Enish Gabay, if he's like a bank, if he's a depositor, if people deposit items by his house for safekeeping, so then it's possible that he did have a silver goblet in his house, mishtaba, v'shakal. He would swear that it was in his house, and therefore he was the victim of this burning of his house, and therefore the guy that started the fire would have to pay. V'iloi, but if he's not a rich person, or is not somebody that people deposit items like that in his house, lavko kamine, he's not trusted, even if he would swear. We wouldn't believe him. Amalei Rav Adabrei Rav Avila Ravashi. Rav Avila said to Ravashi, Ma ben gazlan chamson. This is a side question. What is the difference between a gazlan, somebody who steals an item, and a chamson? Chamson generally is somebody who's greedy, but they both end up with the item of their desires. So what is the practical difference? Amalei chamson yov dami. Somebody who's greedy actually somehow gets the victim the money. Gazlan lo yav dami. Someone who's a gazlan would not even give money. He's an outright thief and would steal it outright. He doesn't give the money. Amalei, so Rav Ashi said to Rav Ada, Iyav Dami, Chamson Karasle, if he actually gives the money, why is he called Chamson? What did he do wrong? He's actually paying for it. If someone pressured somebody to sell something and the guy sold it, it's a good sale. So at the end of the day, the guy that sold it got his money. So why is we label him as a Chamson? If the guy says, I want to sell it, so therefore then the guy that gave the money, even though he pressured him to sell, okay, well, that's not such a big avera. He did not say that I want to sell it. So if he did not say I want to sell it, and you actually, took it from him and then deposited the money, you did a wrong thing. You're a chamson. You're a greedy person. And we say that in our vidui chamson, and people in their own way are sinning in this way. Chamson, kamasnu. Nevertheless, there's places explain that if somebody is a gazlan, we don't trust him as an aid. If someone is a chamson, then he could still be considered a witness, a kosher witness. We go to the Samach Beis and Beis, so the Mishnah. The Mishnah, if a guy had it was a blacksmith, and a spark went out from his hammer, and it started a fire, he's obligated to pay. But perhaps he's even more obligated than somebody starting a fire, because it's his actions, his direct action. He may be considered like an odom amazik. But be that as it may, he's liable. Now the Mishnah says, because a person has to take, safety precautions when he's being a blacksmith and dealing with fire. The Mishnah says, guy had a camel, and it was full like snow, full of flax. And passed through a public thoroughfare, and somehow his flax ended up into the store of somebody else. And the guy had let's say, a lamp in the storekeeper had a lamp in the store, and it got, because of the lamp of the storekeeper, the flammable flax was turned on, got inflamed. And somehow a house burned down. Who's held liable? The owner of the camel, because he should make sure that if his flax on top of his camel is bulging, he should make sure that it doesn't bump into a lamp inside somebody else's store. But if the Chenveni did something negligent by putting his lamp outside his store, the Chenveni, the storekeeper, is liable, because he has no right to put his lamp outside the store. Rabbi Yehuda says, "B'ner Chanukah parter." If he had his ner Chanukah outside his store, then he's parter, because obviously you're allowed to keep your ner Chanukah outside. If it's Chanukah time, the Baal Hagamel, the owner of the camel, should be more careful. Amar Ravina Mishmei de Rava. Ravina said in the name of Rava, Shlami Namid Rabbi Yehuda. We hear from a Yehuda that held that ner Chanukah. If the camel owner bumped into the ner Chanukah, the owner of the store is not held liable. So we see from that, ner Chanukah mitzvah anicha b'toich hasar. You have to keep the ner Chanukah lower than 10 tvachim, and that's part of the mitzvah. The Isal, so that limits the liability of the storekeeper, because he had to keep his ner Chanukah outside his store, and he had to keep it within the height of the camel. The Isal Kadaita Klamal Masara. If you have a right to put your ner Chanukah higher than 10 tvachim, why did Rabbi Yehuda say that with ner Chanukah, the owner of the storekeeper is not held liable? The owner of the camel could say, you should have known that people are walking in the street, and could be a camel could walk in the street with flax, with flammable material. So you're supposed to put your ner Chanukah 10 feet higher than that. 10 feet tall, and so that this wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened. So it must be that the ner Chanukah is a mitzvah to keep it lower to the ground. You have to keep it within 10 tefachim of the ground. So that was Ravina said in the name of Rava. Amri, but the yeshiva guys didn't like that. They said it's no proof. Not so. Even if you put the ner Chanukah higher than 10 tvachim, way high, 10 amas, you'll still be yotze the mitzvah of ner Chanukah. My Amrit, what's your faulting why you want to fault the owner of the storekeeper for not doing that? You're telling the storekeeper you should have, now that you could be yotze the mitzvah keeping the ner Chanukah 10 amas high. So why don't we hold him accountable for not doing that? So the answer is, even the mitzvah causes, since he's doing a mitzvah, Rabbanim wouldn't bother him. In other words, Rabbanim, when they established the mitzvah, they gave you the easiest way to perform the mitzvah. And if it's most convenient to keep it low, keep it in front of your store, waist height, right? So therefore, the Chachamim didn't require him, to be concerned about maybe the camel is going to walk in the street and he's going to bump into that ner Chanukah, because the Chachamim wanted to make the doing of the mitzvahs as easy as possible. So we don't fault the owner of the chanus, the owner of the storekeeper. We'll only fault the owner of the camel. But really, you can't put ner Chanukah higher than very high, higher than 10 tvachim, higher than 10 amas. But there's a limit how high you can put ner Chanukah. Rav Kana said, there was a speech. Rav Nosson made a speech and says, if you put the ner Chanukah higher than 20 amas, pesula, that is not kosher. It's not kosher. It's too high. If it's higher than 40 feet, it's possible. Kisukah kumavi. It's like the halacha of sukkah and the halacha of that cross beam in front of a mavoi, which we learned from Masechta Eruvin. If it's higher than 20 amas, you should lower it, or a sukkah that's 20 amas high, this kach is 40 feet above, it's possible. And also the Ner Chanukah, if a person is lighting the Ner Chanukah outside his house, not in the window, but outside his house, right in front of his house, and he puts up a stand that very 40 feet high, 20 amas, he's not yaitza hadam la chakainis. Now, the Mishnah will just start the next parak, the seventh parak. Meruba midas tashlumi kefil, midas tashlumi abba v'chamisha. We know that kefil is if you steal an item, you pay double. If it was a shor, an ox, or a sheep, then you pay. Sometimes, if you actually stole an ox or sheep and you slaughtered it or sold it, the Torah says you pay 4 times or 5 times. So you pay 4 or 5 times. That's called the payment of abba v'chamisha. So the Mishnah says, if you steal a sheep, you pay 4 times. If you steal an ox, you pay 5 times. Anyway, but there are more circumstances where you will pay double than you pay 4 or 5 times. So the obvious, the more circumstances that you'll pay kefil, not abara v'chamisha. Shemidish tashlumi kefil, to pay double. Now you had this bein b'davar sheyesh beruchaim, bein b'davar she'ein beruchaim. Kefil applies whether it's an animal you steal, you pay double, or you steal any item, you steal a pen, maybe you have to pay 2 pens. The tashlumi abba v'chamisha is only if you steal an ox and a sheep, and you sold it or shechted it. Learn the pasuk there. The Torah tells you how much you have to pay above a chamisha. So it only is limited by an ox or a sheep. Someone who steals, a ganav stole something, and another ganav stole from that ganav, he would not pay tashlumi kefil. Someone who shechted or sold an item, let's say a shor or a seh was stolen, and somebody else stole it from the ganav, he shechted it and sold it, he would not also be liable to pay misham tashlumi abba v'chamisha. It's only the first derivative. The first ganav, if he steals something, he has to pay kefil, and if he steals a shor and seh, he would have to pay abba v'chamisha. So they're just going to start the Gemara and then we'll stop. Ve'ilu midish tashlumi kefil, they had this bein beganav, bein b'tayin tanis ganav. Tashlumi kefil. The Mishnah could have said another circumstances where you will pay kefil and not abba v'chamisha is if you're a toyin tainus ganav. You see, tashlumi kefil was, as we know, applies by a ganav. But what about a toyin tainus ganav and a shomer who says, the item that you deposited from me, let's say it was a sheep, it was stolen from me, and then it turns out that the shomer was the ganav, the guardian was the ganav, he would pay kefil. But what about, let's say it turns out that the guardian, the shomer, actually not only said it was stolen, but turned out not only to be the ganav, but he actually slaughtered it and ate it, right? So would he pay abba v'chamisha? The Mishnah could have said that a toyin tainus ganav would only pay kefil and does not pay abba v'chamisha. And since the Mishnah did not use that as a difference, by both a toyin tainus ganav not only would pay kefil, but it would also pay abba v'chamisha. Since it didn't use that as a differentiation, could have said that toyin tainus ganav would pay kefil. It doesn't say that abba v'chamisha only pays by a ganav, but not by a toyin tainus ganav. Our Mishnah supports the opinion of Rabbi Bar Abba. A toyin tainus ganav, somebody who was a shomer watching a deposit, and he was a guardian, and then he says it was stolen, and turns out that he was the ganav, misham tashlumi kefil, he would pay kefil. He slaughtered and sold the item, misham tashlumi abba v'chamisha, he would pay 4 or 5. So others say, the Gemara say this was the version. Would you say our Mishnah is a proof that Would you want to say that our Mishnah supports Rab Chia bar Abba because it didn't use that of Tain Tanis Ganav as a differentiation between a Ganav and between Kefil and Abba Chamisha? There's another difference between sometimes you pay Kefil and you will not pay. The circumstances will not call upon to pay Abba Chamisha, and so is our Mishnah a support? So the Gemara says no, our Mishnah is not a support. Mikatoni ein bein. If the Mishnah would have said, these are the only difference, there's no other difference between what I said in the Mishnah, then you're right. Then it would be a support. Meruba Katani, the Mishnah just starts off and says there are more circumstances where you will pay kefil and not pay above chamisha. But yes, the Mishnah could have left out that maybe by a Tain Tanis Ganav, you would pay kefil and not pay above chamisha. Tana Bashia, maybe the Tana would have put it in the Mishnah, but he just left it out for whatever reason. He wasn't giving you a definitive list. Okay, Hashem, we'll continue with Daf Samach Gimel tomorrow.